Hey everybody, Ian Bremmer here. It is like 80 degrees outside in New York City, so yeah, I'm wearing a hat. I'm not wearing a blazer. I'm not apologetic about it. It's coronavirus. That's right, and it's your quick take. Let's see what's going on right now. Well, first of all, I continue to see this incredible polarization about the United States is this hot mess. It's a disaster. No, it's the best response ever, depending on like what side of the political agenda you're on. I actually think that the U.S. response so far continues to be kind of mediocre, kind of middling. First, the big story, right? How many people are dying? Now, Trump should not have been a cheerleader around people dying early on. When we had those cases and you saw him, 100,000 deaths, and he said that anything less than 100,000 would be great, and then it was going to go 60 to 80,000. Now it is very clear that the models, even the most conservative model the U.S. was using, the government was using, is now expecting 147,000 deaths by August. So well over 150 by Election Day. Trump, of course, will say, but if I had done nothing, we would have 2.2 million deaths. So you got to make sure that you're framing properly for good advertising. But it's going to be hard to sell that, given that he said under 100,000 is successful, and we're going to be well over that. So, on the cheerleading front, on the messaging front, the United States is obviously a hot mess. On the Twitter front, the American president is most divisive on Twitter of anyone that we've seen in the developed world, though less so than Bolsonaro in Brazil. But how about on actual deaths? Per capita deaths in the United States compared to Europe, all of Europe is kind of slightly better than average, worse than Germany, which is best of the large economies, but considerably better than Spain, Italy, and France. And we should be kind of looking at per capita death, not how many people die overall, but rather, like, given the size of your population, how many people are suffering, especially as you're thinking about whether you want to open the economy and how much and how quickly. Those are the comparisons you want to make. Spain opening earlier than the Americans, their numbers are going up. That shows you what we can expect in parts of the United States that have similar caseload. Now, if you look just at New York, we look a lot worse than those countries. Of course, if you look only at their cities that are the worst hit, they look a lot worse than the United States. So again, I wish we could have Merkel-type response, but I'm really glad we don't have Macron or Boris Johnson-type response. So it's in between. On the economic front, the United States so far has been pretty strong. Why? Because we have a federal government that functions. The Europeans don't. And so as a consequence, you've got them talking about, lawsuits between the German High Court and the Europeans, and, von der Leyen from the European Union saying this won't stand. The fiscal environment is incredibly contentious right now in Europe, and they've not done as much as the Americans have. Where in the United States, so far early days, the bipartisan support to get the economy out of the doldrums has been very strong. Same from the Fed. And that's one of the reasons the American markets are performing well right now. Now, the concern that I have with an election coming up in November is that we're not going to be able to sustain that. And most of the senators that I talk to are worried about that they think that even though the Senate is still pretty moderate and there's good connections between the Republicans and the Democrats at both sides, not everyone is out there like Rand Paul, saying that taking the far, sort of disruptive, the government has to open up and is being irresponsible right now. Generally speaking, you're talking moderate Dems, moderate Republicans in Senate. But they're all worried that we're not going to be able to continue to get the trillions necessary to keep Americans that are unemployed and underemployed afloat, to keep businesses that are desperately going to need cash, small and medium businesses from going bankrupt, and to keep large companies that don't have a profitability model, like in hospitality, entertainment, airlines, and a number of other sorts of companies that are really, really going to get hit the worst on the back of this crisis. I think that this is going to get a lot more problematic, and the U.S. economic response, which you'd give an A- to so far, probably is going to start looking like a B, a C, or even a D as we get closer. Bill Gates famously gave Trump a D- for his response so far, but I think Bill is focusing mostly on the lack of healthcare coordination side early, plus the communications. Now, in terms of other pieces of the response, I mean, short of a vaccine, almost everything we're seeing around treatment so far doesn't look like it actually changes how quickly we can reopen economies. It's much more about how comfortable you're going to feel about caseload and tracing. And contact tracing, even though we do have apps that are coming online, and wonderful to see Google and Apple working together as two firms that hate each other to develop the capacity for contact tracing to work in a maximally expansive technological platform. But the idea that you're going to need 60-70% minimum compliance for populations for that to actually work effectively by itself, not going to get anything close. I mean, Facebook has 70% penetration. There's no way in God's earth you're going to get that voluntarily from the Americans, from major European populations. Even in Singapore, which is a tiny population, very wealthy, and doesn't care as much about democracy, you only had 15-20% compliance with their contact tracing app. So contact tracing works, but to make it work, you need the ability to take all your data and put it in one place and share it, but you need people doing the work, making the phone calls, those contact tracers. That's hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of people across the developed world. We are nowhere close to that either. So I do think, like my friend Danny Meyer said the other day about his restaurants, that until you have a vaccine, big parts of the economy are not going to run the way they did. And a vaccine needs to not only be developed, but has to be proven and has to be manufactured at scale and has to be distributed with education. And all in that process, start to finish, is 3 years from the beginning of the pandemic. And that's why I continue to think that the economic implications of this are going to be so much worse than we've otherwise seen. So that's a little bit for me. I hope everyone has a pleasant weekend. Enjoy some great weather wherever you are. And if you can't do that, then don't enjoy some great weather, but enjoy some non-great weather in your lives and avoid people. And I'll talk to you all very soon. Be good.